So the study we're going to kind of jump into this week is a really interesting one. We probably all understand the long-term benefits of a consistent breathwork practice. Most of you will have experienced that in your own life, that when you are consistent with breathwork, you start to see some positive changes. There's been many, many studies done on, what happens when you do breathwork every day for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and measures the impacts on heart rate variability, anxiety, stress, sleep, all those kind of things. This study looked at one breathwork session. And I think it's really interesting because we will all come up against, I don't have time, right? Oh, you want me to do breathwork for 2 months? It seems like this daunting thing that's like a big commitment of my time and my effort, and I'm not going to see results for a certain amount of time. It's something that I encounter all the time with my clients. You are all probably the same. And so I think this is a really nice way to be like, well, it doesn't always have to be the long-term consistency that's giving you benefits. Here is this, research that shows us just one session. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. And so this study was done, right? What are the benefits of one session of deep, slow breathing? And what did that do for vagal tone and anxiety? And they also tested this on young and old adults, right? And I think that's really interesting because it again gives us a little bit of validity to like, are you a 20-year-old or a 60-year-old? Well, we've actually done the study and show that it's going to help you both. Now, when they say session of deep, slow breathing, what they did in this study was resonance frequency, 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. So what I kind of want to discuss today is like, well, why did they do this study? What were they trying to find out? What did they find out? The major findings and why these findings matter, and then what can be the kind of practical takeaway that we can use ourselves or that we can perhaps share with clients. And so let's start with, anxiety. It's very widespread. I was looking, since 2005 to 2015, prevalence went up 60%, right? 2018, actually since 2020 to now, it's gone up another 30% post-COVID, right? We know anxiety negatively impacts mental health, and there's really good research to show that it's associated with increased all-cause mortality, right? Prevalence of anxiety is in light of lots of other comorbidities or pathologies, right? So it's not just this mental health issue, it's a physical health issue and an emotional health issue, and it impacts all of these different systems. We seem to see anxiety, posing more of a threat as we age because, of the prevalence of these kind of comorbidities. And what the kind of theorized idea is that we start to lose resiliency as we age. We see more sympathetic nervous system activity, less parasympathetic. Sleep usually starts to get a little bit impacted, so there's these other factors. And so it's really important, as we have an aging population, to provide them with tools, right, that can combat the negative impacts of anxiety. So there's been numerous studies on 6 breaths a minute. I like to call it the magic number, and how it can impact physiological states, right? So things like heart rate variability. But what this study also looked at was, the more subjective experience of anxiety. And I think that's important because I find, and most of you will probably find the same, like anxiety is subjective in a way. Like, I know what anxiety feels like. You all probably know what anxiety feels like. We might be talking about completely different things, right? For me, it might be chest tightness and my heart pounding. For you, it might be sweaty palms and racing mind. For someone else, it might be tingling and trembling and sweat. Like anxiety is really our own unique experience. So this looked at the more psychological, like it was a questionnaire to measure your anxiety for pre and post breath work, but then they also looked at the more physiological side of things of heart rate variability. So the goal of this paper was to kind of use slow breathing, 6 breaths a minute in young and old adults, measure how it impacted their psychological anxiety, right? How they feel and interpret, and also their physiological anxiety using heart rate variability. So it was groups of about 25 people, so 25 around about 20-year-olds and 25 around about 65-year-olds. And to look at, they took a questionnaire, anxiety questionnaire, they did 5 minutes of breathing, and then they took the same questionnaire post. They also measured heart rate variability continuously throughout, so pre, during, and post. And then they kind of combined those two things. What I think is interesting, right? They just did 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out for everyone. If you've been around me long enough, really, really emphasize the importance of personalization. right? My resonance frequency might be 4.5 seconds and 7 seconds, right? And so they've taken 40 people or 50 people and just said, you're all going to breathe at 6 breaths a minute. Interestingly, as we'll see with the results, everyone got a positive impact from that. But my question is, like, would they have seen more of a positive impact if we'd actually done a little bit of assessment and found, oh, you're 4.5 breaths a minute, you're 6 breaths a minute, you're 7 breaths a minute. And we use that for that 5 minutes. Wasn't done. So this was just everyone 6 breaths a minute. The heart rate variability test they measured is something called HRV, which is the high frequency. There is some interpretations through literature of like what is the best measurement of HRV and does that correlate to vagal tone. This study was published in Nature, which is arguably the most peer-reviewed, well-established, journal out there, one of the really top-tier journals. So I'm assuming someone brought it up and said, well, is this a good measurement of vagal tone? And they're a lot smarter than I am, so they probably found, yes, it is. So major findings, 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes of breathing. State anxiety, as measured by a questionnaire, was significantly lower in both younger and older adults after 5 minutes of breathing. Most of you would have been like, obviously, if you've done 5 minutes of breath work and felt it had an impact on you, you kind of knew that was going to be the case. What they also saw physiologically was heart rate variability increased, and as a kind of corresponding response, anxiety decreased, right? So there's this kind of negative correlation. The higher heart rate variability, the lower anxiety was perceived, right? So the greater that someone can increase their heart rate variability, the lower their subjective anxiety. Really important point. It's not just, everyone got a generic response. The higher they saw the heart rate variability, the lower that person perceived and rated their anxiety, which I think is really interesting. Why do these results kind of matter? Like, what is it kind of telling us? I think it tells us 3 things, right? Firstly, slow, deep breathing exercises are particularly helpful, particularly in an older population that are aging, but really for everyone, young and old, to improve and reduce states of anxiety. First big one. Secondly, a big takeaway was that there is a correlation between heart rate variability and perceived anxiety. Again, this has been suggested in a lot of research, and you look at the rise of Whoop straps and Fitbits and, everything that's measuring, and we see higher heart rate variability has a lower association, not with just anxiety, with many pathologies, diseases, dysfunctions. But this is a nice kind of like, we can actually say high heart rate variability decreases anxiety from this study. And thirdly, is we can kind of look at heart rate variability as an indicator of vagal tone. Vagal tone is all the rage, and having something that's a little bit more objective and measurable, I think is super important. So the big kind of takeaway, right? Breathing slowly, around about 6 breaths a minute. Again, I would argue that there's room for optimization here of actually assessing and finding the exact rate of resonance for someone and then doing that for 5 minutes. But 5 minutes is going to reduce subjective anxiety. I feel less anxious, and also physiological anxiety. My heart rate variability reflects that. This holds true in younger adults as well as older adults, right? So it's not specific to, you don't lose the ability as we get older. And so what can we kind of take away? The practical application of this. And as you've all kind of participated in the challenges over the last couple of weeks, 5 minutes, right? Can we carve out 5 minutes every day to do some slower, deeper breathing? Could it be that simple? This study suggests yes. So as a kind of cumulative tool that I'm just engaging in that, but also as a in the moment tool, right? I'm experiencing anxiety right now. Can I carve 5 minutes out of my day, right? Wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, to breathe slowly, to find that rate of resonance and use that practice to reduce my physiological anxiety and also my perceived level of anxiety. Also, we can kind of look at this as a tool to improve vagal tone over time. Vagal tone, inflammation, physiological capacity, healthy aging, right? There's a lot of, again, further research that shows why vagal tone is so important. So I think, right, very simple, 5 minute practice, breathe slowly, breathe deeply, and it's going to reduce anxiety. Not because I said it will, but because the research kind of points to this in a peer-reviewed published paper in arguably the world's most robust journal. I think that's fantastic.